Hey everyone, I hope y'all are having a great day, and today I thought I would do something a little bit different and not talk about books. I kind of want to start this new series, I guess I would call it, called New Obsessions, because I do this thing where I discover something and I get really deeply infatuated with it. And sometimes it doesn't last very long. It might just be like for a week or two, but sometimes it lasts a really long time. But regardless of how long it lasts, this happens frequently. I'll just randomly get super obsessed with something. So I thought I would start a series of videos where I just talk about what I'm obsessed with at that time. I don't know if this series thing is actually going to work out, considering my track records for series isn't exactly the best. I started one maybe like a year ago called Top 5, and I literally only made that first Top 5 video and then I never made another one. Good one, Sophia. Okay, but today I want to talk about podcasts, because I discovered podcasts, I think, last weekend or something, and I immediately just became obsessed with them. I'm so into podcasts. I listen to them when I'm driving, and I do drive a lot because I live pretty far away from my school, so there's a lot of time to listen to podcasts. When I think of podcasts, I think of older people, like middle-aged or older people, people who have jobs and are professionals. I feel like that's the podcast demographic, which is such a weird conception to have. I know. But I know it's not just me who thinks that, because I asked one of my friends, I was like, hey, do you listen to podcasts? And she said, does anybody? I think I just avoided podcasts for a really long time because I had this misconception that they weren't free. I thought I had to pay for them, and I don't know where that thought came from, but it was something that I just took as fact. And so that was definitely a big deterrent in my listening to podcasts. But anyways, last year I was talking to one of my friends, Doug. He's been in a couple of my videos, and he said that he listens to podcasts when he drives, which is such a new concept to me because personally when I drive, I've always listened to my own music. And I was like, what? Podcasts? Why don't I listen to podcasts? Am I missing out on something? So anyway, I recently got a new phone. It's the rose gold one. It's basically just pink. But when something is new, I think you look at it with sharper, fresher eyes. I saw the podcast app. I'm sure it's always been there, but I just now took notice of it. So I checked it out, and it just opened a whole new world to me. I just looked at the featured page and a bunch of different charts, and anytime I saw a podcast that I thought sounded interesting, I would subscribe to it, and then I listened to one episode of every podcast I subscribed to, and if that first episode didn't impress me, or if I just didn't like it, I would unsubscribe to it. So again, I'm very new to podcasts. Like I said, I'm judging all of these podcasts just by 1 or 2 episodes, but I just wanted to go through my list of podcasts and talk about the ones that I initially subscribed to but then unsubscribed to, as well as the ones that I'm still subscribed to. By the way, this is how I judge whether I want to continue listening to a podcast. I really only have like 2 criteria. Number 1, I would like for the podcast to be educational to some extent, to any kind of degree. I just want to get something out of the podcast. I want to learn something by listening to it. And number 2, I want to like the host or hosts. If the hosts are unlikable, the podcast is unlikable, because podcasts are long, you know, they're an hour long, some are longer. It's just way too much investment to listen to an hour of someone you don't even like. And this could be like if you don't like their personality, or it could just be like if you don't like their voice, because no one wants to listen to an hour of a grating, irritating voice. My videos are okay though, because they're not an hour long. So anyways, I'm gonna start with the podcast that I tried and didn't like, so I ended up unsubscribing from. The first one is called The Adam Carolla Show, and I literally only subscribed to this because it had like 19,000 ratings. I said to myself, this is wildly popular. This Adam Carolla guy must be freaking hilarious. Meh, he was just meh. He wasn't not funny. He wasn't just funny enough to listen to for like 2 hours. And also, I thought his voice was extremely irritating. I did not finish that first episode that I listened to. First, because it was way too long, and second, because I just wasn't enjoying it. The next one is called PRI Michael Feldman's Whad'Ya Know? And this was recommended to me by someone on Twitter because I asked for like educational, trivia related podcasts. And this one could have been good. It could have been good. The episode I listened to, the first part of it was an interview with the film critic from Chicago Tribune. I think his name is Michael Phillips or something like that. And I thought that was so interesting because I love reviews. I have a review channel. And so I really liked that interview part, except I didn't like the host, Michael Feldman. I didn't like his jokes. His humor was just not for me. I didn't find him funny. And then I got to the trivia part, and the trivia questions were like so obscure. So Michael Feldman would give the contestant the answer. Like he would be like, oh, why don't you consider this thing? And the person would be like, oh yeah, I think the answer is this thing. That's not what I'm looking for in my trivia podcasts. And the final one that I unsubscribed to because I didn't like is called PodQuiz weekly trivia quiz. And this one also could have been really great. It has a great range of trivia questions, but I just hate how it's formatted. Because when it comes to trivia, I crave instant gratification. So once I hear the question and once I've thought of an answer, I want to immediately know the right answer. I want to be able to check myself immediately. But the way this podcast is formatted is they give you all the trivia questions and then they have like an interlude and then they come back and they give you all the answers. And I do not like that format. Also, I thought the audio of this podcast was really jank. It sounded really stuffy. Now, these are the podcasts that I subscribe to and still am subscribed to, and I really enjoy all of them. The first one is NPR's Wait, Don't Tell Me. And I didn't realize that I have been listening to this podcast before I even really knew what podcasts were. It's because my dad has NPR playing in his car all the time. So anytime I'm in his car on the weekend, Wait, Don't Tell Me is playing. Wait, Don't Tell Me is an excellent podcast. It's excellent. I love the host, and there are usually 3 guests, and I love the guests always. They're always really funny, and they have great chemistry, and the questions are always fun. And it's informative. It's about current events. Now I know that Victoria's Secret bombshell perfume also doubles as mosquito repellent, so that's cool. I think it's a good blend of being informative and funny. The next one I subscribe to is called Surprisingly Awesome, and actually I've only listened to 1 episode of this, and I didn't even listen to that completely. It was about free throws, and I actually didn't even enjoy it that much. I didn't find it very interesting. I kept it because I thought it had a lot of promise and a lot of potential, and I liked the 2 hosts. I think their names are Adam and Adam, and I just liked the way they played off each other, but I didn't really care for what they were saying, so I kept it. I still haven't finished that 1 episode. I think I might try a couple more of their episodes before I decide whether I want to stay subscribed to it, but I do think that it has a lot of potential. The next one is called Stuff You Should Know, and this one is really interesting. It talks about really specific things. I remember the first episode I listened to was about some kind of codex. I don't remember what it's called, but it currently resides in one of Yale's libraries, and it's a codex that is centuries old and it still has not been cracked. So that was really interesting. I also recently listened to their episode about staring. That was interesting too. I think this podcast is just very fascinating. I love listening to it because I'm always learning something. And I like the hosts, except for the fact that sometimes one person will say something, he'll bring up a point, and then the other host will say, sure, as a response. Both of them do it to each other. They say sure in response to each other after someone has brought up a point, but the way they say it just sounds really condescending almost. I don't know, it makes me as a listener feel uncomfortable because it kind of feels like whoever is saying sure is discrediting the person who was initially talking. I don't know if I'm making sense. Also, I know that's an extremely nitpicky thing to say, but it's just something that frequently pops up in my head while I'm listening. The next podcast I have is called Good Job Brain, and this was actually recommended to me by Doug, and he said it was a trivia podcast, so I listened to it, and it's okay. One of the hosts, I think her name is Karen, is just not one of my favorites. Her voice is a little grating, and I think sometimes she says really obnoxious things, but I think it's a solid podcast. It's not one of my favorites, but I do enjoy it. The next podcast is called Switched on Pop, and this was recommended to me by someone on Twitter. Thank you so much to the person who recommended this to me. I love it so much. Technically, I've only listened to 1 of the episodes, and it was about Adele's Hello and Drake's Hotline Bling, but essentially, the purpose of this podcast is to get a subject of music or a couple of songs, and the 2 hosts analyze these songs both lyrically as well as musically, as in they look at the melodies and they look at the chord progression and they involve a lot of actual music theory. I think it's such a good podcast. I think it's so well done. The only thing that I don't love about this podcast is the fact that their lyrical analysis is pretty in-depth, which I think is a little pointless when it comes to pop music, because a lot of pop music is co-written by so many different people. Sometimes the recording artist has absolutely no contribution to the lyrics whatsoever, so to lyrically analyze something and attribute it to an original thought that the artist had isn't always the applicable case, so that's the only downside of it. Sometimes they read too much into the lyrics, and I'm thinking, did the recording artist even write that? I don't know. But Switched on Pop is definitely one of my favorite podcasts that I've tried. The next one I have is called This American Life, and I got this one because it was high on one of the charts. I listened to 1 episode the other day, and it was okay. It was interesting. It's not one of my favorites, but I do think it's pretty fascinating. It focuses on stories about different people across the nation in different periods of time. Again, I don't know how much I would recommend it, but I'm not bored when I'm listening to it. That's probably a good sign. The next podcast I have is probably my absolute favorite out of all of these. I mean, I really like Switched on Pop, but I really, really love this one, and it's called Ask Me Another by NPR. This was also recommended to me on Twitter by somebody, and I love it. I love it so, so much. It's basically a trivia / word game / puzzle podcast, and it's so much fun. It's so, so entertaining and kind of educational. It's not that educational. The questions often focus on pop culture, like movies and music and stuff. But I love the host. She is hilarious, and I love the questions. They're always so creative and clever and well thought out. I do think that they're too easy, so it's not as exciting, I guess, answering these questions because they're not really challenging. But I still really, really enjoy this podcast. And the last one I have is called Trivial Warfare, a PodQuiz style trivia game show. And this is just pure trivia. They do trivia questions in rounds, and it's between these two men. I think it has a great range of questions. The only thing I don't really like about this podcast is the fact that one of the hosts always talks through his thought process before he gives an answer. And like I said previously, when it comes to trivia, I crave instant gratification. So once I hear the question, I want to know the answer immediately. To me, that's a little frustrating. I just want to skip ahead to the answer. But yeah, those are all the podcasts that I have tried listening to. If you have any recommendations for me, definitely leave them in the comments. I will definitely check them out. Please keep in mind that I do really appreciate educational / trivia related podcasts the most. I'm also not interested in podcasts that are series in the sense that you have to listen to all of the episodes to know what's going on. Like, I know a really popular one is called Serial, but to listen to that, you have to start at the beginning of the story and you have to listen to all the episodes, and I'm just not up for that kind of commitment. So yeah, podcasts are my new obsession. I don't know how long this will last, but I'm definitely enjoying them at the moment. Again, I do want to make this into a series of videos where I can make a new video each time I find a new infatuation. Again, my track record is not the best, but I definitely know that there will be a second video to this series because I already know what my next video is going to be about. I'll give you a hint. Alexander Hamilton, America sings for you. Alright, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all have a fantastic day and happy reading. Goodbye!